graduate teaching assistant for intellectual property law in the law faculty and is teaching FHS TOTS as a fixed-term, non-stipendiary lecturer in Mansfield College, Oxford. He has served on the editorial boards of the Cambridge Law Review and the Journal of Indian Law and Society, and was even the chief editor of the latter during his last 6 months with the journal. He has also worked in Haryana as a Chief Minister's Good Governance Associate, wherein he worked with the state government and the district administration to improve public administration. Mr. Sarath has also served as the administrative head of the NUJS HSF Bridge Project, a project that educates underprivileged kids living in the slums of Kolkata. It is indeed with proud privilege that I welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Is my mic working well? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Perfect.
Further, I would also like to welcome all the interested participants who have been eagerly waiting to learn about the process of abstract writing. I also extend my warm welcome to the organizers, conveners, and volunteers. Once again, I welcome you all. Without any further delay, we may start with the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, Aishwarya. I think I was approached by Sangeet. I'm sure there were other people as well, apart from you and Sangeet, who have worked tirelessly to make this event happen. So I thank all of the people involved in the organization of this event. I thank you all for inviting me to join in. It was a wonderful evening. I myself organize these kind of talks at Oxford, so I know the organization that goes into these webinars, and I'm very surprised to see the number of people who are participating in this webinar. In fact, when we organize, we get around 20 students participating, and I see 45 joined already. So it looks like people are really interested in, and I hope I can deliver on the expectations in the room today. Before I start, maybe I could speak a bit about the format that I'm thinking of. Abstract writing is hopefully, as we shall see, it's a simple enough process. So I hope it doesn't take me a lot of lecture time or me just monologuing to cover how to write an abstract. I hope that I can give a layout with some substance and meat in it, and perhaps we can have a question answer, doubt clearing kind of session to take forward if there are questions left after giving the layout. But I suspect it will be a simple enough process. I really welcome questions between the presentation. So I really welcome, if you don't understand something, it could be because I spoke too fast or the connection gave away or anything of that sort. Just feel free to ask. I think as a matter of technical feature, the participants are muted. Am I correct, Aishwarya?
Yes, sir.
Can they still type the questions in the chat?
Yes, they can access the chat.
Okay, perfect. So if you could type the questions in the chat, and if Aishwarya could just call them out to me if I miss them, if I'm in the flow, and then I could just answer the questions and continue with my lecture, because I don't want to keep, I think there is more value to be had if I structure this talk based on what you want to know. So therefore, I think the doubts take priority over whatever predetermined structure I might have in my head. Okay, so with that introduction, let's start off on abstracts. There are two kinds of abstracts, and both kinds of abstracts are going to be relevant in your conference, in the conference hosted by GLC. So the first kind of abstract is the abstract that you put on your end product, on your publication. When you have read journal articles or book chapters, you would remember seeing a paragraph immediately after the heading and before the introduction. It is often, as a matter of convention, given in italics. So that is the abstract that I'm presently talking about. This is the abstract found in the end product. You can call it the publication abstract. Now, this abstract is typically very short. So this is not the abstract that you're going to be submitting presently. Like, I think you have a submission. I briefly glanced over your schedule for the conference, and I think you have a abstract submission in 2 to 3 days. So this is not that abstract. This is the abstract that will form part of your final paper. Let's cover that first, because that's the simpler abstract. That abstract is typically short. It's between 150 to 200 or 150 to 250 words. The singular purpose of that abstract, or the current understanding behind it, is that you're trying to explain to your reader, whoever is reading your journal article or your book chapter, what the findings from your research output are. So your conclusion, what it could be one finding. Yes, thank you, Aishwarya. That's very kind of you. You could either type in, you could either have a singular finding from your paper, or you could have multiple findings. You would list all of those findings in this abstract. And the thought behind it is that someone can read that abstract and decide whether or not they want to read the full article or not. So we want to make it easier for our reader to determine if our article is relevant to them or not. I write a lot about sports, which you will see in the illustrations that I give today. So if I were to give my exact findings in my publication, then a subsequent IP researcher working in this area would know that my paper is relevant for them. Then they would read my entire paper to understand how I arrived at my findings. If they are not writing on esports or something that my findings are related to, I don't want to waste their time reading my paper. So this abstract is something we write for the convenience of the reader so that they can decide whether or not they read our paper. What are the things that we put in this abstract? Like I said, the most important thing is to have the finding. But if we were to just list down the finding in a singular sentence, then it would be very difficult for a reader to know what we are talking about. I'll also illustrate all of these with an example, so hopefully it will make more sense at that point in time. But the idea is that you give some contextual information about your topic so that it is possible to make sense of your findings. And you do this in 3 to 4 sentences. So you're not writing anything in detail. You write 2 or 3 sentences which give enough contextual information that the reader can understand your findings and then determine whether or not they want to read your paper. Let's see one illustration of this article I am writing right now. So I'll just share my screen. Okay, is my screen visible now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Kevia. So let's just concentrate on the first abstract. The heading is "Do Esports Broadcast Infringe Video Game Copyright?" This is a piece that I'm still working on. Have worked on, but it's not yet published. I've given it to the publishers. This is an example of the kind of abstract we are talking about presently. It's a publication abstract. It's an abstract that I've put in a finished product. So this will come between the heading and introduction, and let's see what it tells my reader. If you look at the last sentence, I conclude that unauthorized broadcasts infringe the video games copyright under Section 51A of the Copyright Act 1957. This is the finding from my research out. This is the finding from my paper, my 5,000 word or how many ever word paper. This is the finding that I have. But if I were to just write, I conclude that unauthorized broadcasts infringe the video games copyright under Section 51A1 of the Copyright Act, that makes no sense. Nobody will understand what I'm talking about. So all of these lines try to give enough contextual information so that people understand what my finding is. And once they understand the finding, they can decide whether or not to read the paper. Let me just read this particular abstract down for you so that we can, maybe I won't take you through exactly how it adds context, but I think if I read it, you will be able to understand how those lines explain what I'm writing about and how they link to the conclusion. So I'll just read it out. Esports, as commonly understood, is the competitive playing of video games, often in league-based formats. My heading is "Do Esports Broadcast Infringe Video Game Copyright?" The most unknown term in this to the average reader is going to be esports. Esports is a term that only a small subset of the population reading my article would know. Most of these are going to be people from a generation that don't play or watch esports. So this is the most important context information that I have to give. Therefore, I give it in the beginning. Then I want to speak about how video games link to esports, because my entire topic is on how esports infringe video game copyright. So I talk about how most video games used in esports are conducive to the gameplay being broadcasted. In this sentence, I speak about the technical way in which how video games allow that gameplay to be broadcasted. So this sentence explains this sentence. Then I talk about what I say that currently video game companies don't allow such broadcasts to be made. So I'm setting out what the problem is. The problem is that video game companies don't want independent third-party organizers to broadcast gameplay without their consent. I seek to understand whether such an unauthorized broadcast, i.e., without the consent of the video game studio, would infringe any copyright associated with the video game. And then my conclusion now makes sense with all of this information. My conclusion is that unauthorized broadcasts do infringe the video game's copyright. So this is the first kind of abstract that I wanted to discuss with you, which is essentially an abstract that helps the reader determine whether or not they want to read your article. And we're not trying to sort of canvas the reader into reading our article. It's an objective statement of what our findings are. We want the reader to make an informed decision whether or not they want to read our article. Now we will move on to the second kind of abstract, the abstract that you have to submit in 2 to 3 days. But before I do that, I can take any questions in case we have it. I can give a minute for people to go through what we discussed so far. If there are any questions, I'll take. Okay, that's perfect. I think we can. I think you have had time to go through what we discussed, and I'm hoping that there are no questions because we've all understood what this first kind of abstract is. And I'm not really surprised there aren't any questions because, like I said, it's a very straightforward process. So it's easy enough to understand and maybe a bit difficult to implement, but you will learn that by doing that. It is easy enough to understand, and that is the objective from this session. So let's move on to the second type of abstract. The second type of abstract is the abstract in the nature of a research proposal. Here we have completely different objectives, layout, everything from the first kind of abstract. If you recall, I had said that the first kind of abstract is an objective assertion of our findings to just enable the reader to decide whether or not they want to read our article. The second kind of abstract, you are trying to convince someone that your research proposal, that your plan for research, your topic, what you want to research on, is something worth being presented at an academic conference or worth being published in their academic journal or an academic textbook that they publish. So here we are not trying to make this a very objective narration of our factual findings. We are trying to show them what value we bring in. We are trying to explain our topic not to a layperson, but to someone who will be judging whether or not this topic. Good question, Shobha. The earlier thought process used to be that abstracts must necessarily be in the third person. The current thought process is that all writing can be in the first person, and this is something we'll touch towards in the last part of the talk as well, about how to make our writing simpler and easier to understand. So I would strongly advocate for writing in first person, but you should also be mindful of the audience you're writing for. If you know that the person you're writing for prefers narration in the third person, then we as lawyers always play to the judge, right? So we will then accommodate that request. But in an objective situation, I would always write in first person. Thank you so much. Yes, coming back to the second kind of abstract. Yes, so here we are trying to convince them that they should take our paper. we are writing the abstract with this entire mindset, with this thing in mind. The abstract is longer typically, even for conferences or publications that request a shorter abstract, they would want a 500-word abstract. So the previous abstract was always 150 to 200 words. This would be at least 500 words for almost all of the conferences that we would ever present at. Because here you need that word space to tell them what the topic is about. There are a few checkboxes that we need to tick in this abstract. So let's go through them one by one. I think we've already started with the first thing. Tell them what you're writing about. So before this phase, you must have already arrived at a topic. You have themes in the call for papers for the conference, that wonderful brochure that has been prepared for you. There are sub-themes as well, which are indicative. So within the themes or the sub-themes, you would identify a topic that interests you. If you look to the screen, the second segment in the screen, the topic that I presented in Piper conference was lessons from comparing authorship over esports broadcast in EU and US. Now, this is my topic. I have finalized that. Now I'm going to write this abstract that you see below to convince the World Intellectual Property Organization that they should give me an opportunity to present this topic at their conference. First thing, I need to tell them what the topic means. That's the first burden that we need to discharge under this kind of abstract, which is similar to what we did in the last abstract as well, because we did that there to help them understand our finding. Here we do that because, apologies, they can't determine whether or not to take our paper unless they know what the paper is about, right? Now, a small few tips in this area. I have always thought that one of the most efficient ways to explain what your topic is about is by taking the words in your topic and you take them with the most complicated or complex words and you start explaining the words. Now, I'm not saying this is always a strict rule to be followed. If you stare into the screen blankly and you don't know what to write, it's very good to start writing by just explaining the terms in your topic. Because more often than not, that will at the end lead to you explaining the topic in its entirety. So here again, whenever I write about esports, I've learned from painful experience that the toughest battle is to make people understand what esports means. Because it's not a topic that 40-year-old or 50-year-old professors are used to. It's not an area that they're used to. So as like my before abstract, this abstract also begins with talking about what esports is. But you would notice that here I go into way greater detail than the first kind of abstract, because here I have more words to play with. And I also want them to understand that esports is not just a tiny thing that some people do for their entertainment, but it's an established industry. So I quote statistics. So whatever I write, I'm writing with the intention of making the evaluator, the judge, accept or understand that my topic is worth presenting, which is what the burden on you as well, right? So always keep that in mind when you explain the terms in your topic. So I did that for esports in the first paragraph. I don't think I need to establish what authorship means or copyright means or broadcast/copyright means, because I'm writing to the World Intellectual Property Organization and they are experts on what authorship, copyright, etc. means. So you will write depending on who your judges are. If you think your judges know a term, then there's no point explaining that term. That's a waste of words. But if you think it's something alien to them, then you would explain that term as well. Now, something linked to this is sometimes when you look at your topic itself, you'll realize that you have constrained your scope with which you're writing. And what I mean by that is, in this I talk about comparing authorship over esports broadcasting EU and US. Now, by saying EU and US, I have constrained the scope of my topic from all other jurisdictions. I could have looked at China, I could have looked at South Korea, I could have looked at 120 other jurisdictions, but I chose EU and US. Since I'm trying to convince them that my paper is worth presenting, I need to also justify to them why I have chosen EU and US, why EU and US are good jurisdictions to deal with. This I again get by looking at the words in my topic, and I'm trying to see if I've covered all my bases with those words. So when I do that, to justify that, I have this paragraph over here where I talk about how both the US and EU are jurisdictions important to esports industry. I talk about how there is an absence of direct case law in both these jurisdictions. So I'm trying to tell them that I did not choose these jurisdictions randomly. There is a reason I chose these jurisdictions, and there is a scope for research in these jurisdictions. So I'm explaining to them all parts of my topic. This is the first burden that we need to discharge in this kind of abstract. The second burden we need to discharge, and this is going to flow from what I said earlier, is you need to demonstrate to them that there is value in your research. You need, because there is going to be a lot of people applying for this position to present or publish. So you need to show that by giving you that spot, they are making a good investment, that your research will lead to something. So there are a lot of ways to do this. There could be, maybe there's a recent development that happened. Maybe a recent Supreme Court judgment came out that makes your topic very important. Maybe something happened in politics that makes your topic very important. Maybe the upcoming elections are why your topic is very important. In my case, how I discharge that burden is by saying that I say the research is expected to help industry by reducing legal uncertainty. I say that my research will highlight structural tensions in copyright law, for conceptual tensions in whether copyright law itself uh, is on the right track or not. So, which is a slightly more ambitious goal, as I say, but don't be afraid to have ambitious goals in your research proposal. As long as you explain your ambitious goal well enough, that's good, because research should be ambitious, I would say. But the part here is that you should demonstrate the value of your research. You should demonstrate how your research benefits legal academia or society in general. So that is the second burden for you to discharge. The third burden for you to discharge is you need to tell them what you have done already and what more you will have to do. Because like this, an abstract is never written on the first day of your research. You already researched a bit into the area to understand what your topic is. After that, you would have researched at least a little bit into your topic to know what you have to write about, what your topic means, what the subject means, etc. So you will have some research behind you at the time of writing this research proposal kind of abstract. So you tell them exactly what you have done so far. In my case, I told them that I'm 6 months into my research and I have tentative findings in the US law context. I tell them what my findings are. So this sentence is telling them what my findings already are. I told them that there are different legal standards followed in different circuit codes. I told them what that means for the stakeholders, or what I think that means for the stakeholders. If at the time of writing an abstract you have reached the stage of having findings of your own, then you mention that in the abstract. It's a very good thing to do. You also mention what you have left to do in your research. So I tell them that I have new law left, but I tell them that I will do that before the presentation is done, and I will present both US and EU content in the conference, along with the structural issues, the ambitious goal that I had spoken in the beginning. So I tell them what I have done, I tell them what I have left to do, and I show them that I will do it. So these are the three things I would say are required in the research proposal kind of abstract. One is telling them what the topic means. A tip for that is to look at the words in the topic and start explaining those to explain the topic. Second is showing them what value your research brings. Third is convincing them that you can complete this research. You do that by showing them what you have already done and what is left, and maybe even what your plan is to do there. This is the second form of abstract, the research proposal abstract. This is what you'll be submitting in 2 to 3 days, so that the people organizing the conference can determine who to give the spot to for the presentation. Again, this time we'll take 2 minutes because it was a longer talk, or longer lecture on my part on this topic. So take 2 minutes, try to recall all the information I said. If anything does not make sense, ask and I will clear. But we'll take 2 minutes to think about what things are so. Thank you, Musina. For the first kind of abstract, definitely no. So for the publication abstract, you never put a citation or a footnote. It's just you only tell them what your findings are. For the second kind of abstract, you can if you think that it helps your case. So if you look at my abstract, there are parts where I talk about what the existing literature is. And this is a good technique to show how you are adding value. So I told you the second burden of discharge is how to add how to show that you're adding value with your research. You can show what the existing research is, and then it's easier for you to show what your contribution is. So when discussing the existing literature, I need to mention who all have written, right? So I cite these 4 authors who have written in the US, and there's 1 author who have written in the Europe. So I've used something called in-text citation, where I just give the author's name and year in brackets, and I would hopefully, okay, I think I've edited out the bibliography for this, but you put a bibliography and put the full citation in that. You can also use your normal footnotes. Yes, so it depends on how you're writing it, but more often than not, it is good to have some form of citations in your research proposal kind of abstract. This also gives me leeway to say something that I had not said in the beginning. For the second kind of research proposal kind of abstract, the 3 burdens that I discussed in this talk are good as default burdens. So if the organizer does not tell you anything specific that they expect from the abstract, if they give you the freedom to do what you want, then these 3 points are something that you can build your abstract around. And that's the case with the GLC conference. I went through the brochure and I don't think there is any requirement on what has to be there in the abstract. We only have a word limit requirement. But sometimes conferences or publications tell you what they want in your proposal. Then you just do what they ask you to. Your number 1 priority is always going to be following what the journal or the organizer asks you to do. And Musina, in this regard, if they have a rule, if they mention a rule that citations or footnotes are not allowed or are not encouraged in the abstract, then you follow that. If there is no such guidance, my experience has been that more often than not, the research proposal kind of abstract would contain a footnote or a citation. It's easier to write it there. I'll just pause 1 more, like 10 seconds to see if there's another question, and then we can move on to the final segment. Okay, let's move on to the final segment. So we've covered the 2 kinds of abstracts. We've covered what they are for. We've covered what should be in there. Which I also believe we've covered how to write them. So if we know what should be in the abstracts, then we know how to write the abstracts. Now, in the final section, I just want to discuss 2-3 very generic tips on legal writing. They apply for the abstracts. They apply to most of your legal writing. And I'm sure these are tips that you would have already heard, but I think the session won't be complete unless we at least mention those. So I think I have 3 aspects that I want to discuss. First is to write shorter sentences. So again, decades ago, there was a belief that legal language so if you look at maybe bills or very legal documents written in a government office or in a slightly archaic setting, you would still notice the prevalence of very long sentences. Recitals to old contracts should have whereas, comma, whereas, comma, whereas, comma, whereas, and all of that would read as a single sentence if you look at syntactically, because the whereas are all separate, differentiated by colons, semicolons, or commas. In modern academic writing, we do not follow the practice of having long sentences. We try to keep our sentences as short as possible. So when I started out, when I was in my undergraduate, I had a rule that I would never have a sentence in any of my writing that was longer than 50 words. So when you write on a word processor, it's very easy to see how many words your sentences have. If any of my sentences have more than 50 words, I will split that sentence into 2 sentences or 2 or more sentences. Then I try to make the rule that if a sentence has more than 40 words, I'll try to split them into 2 or more sentences. Currently, I operate this rule that if a sentence has more than one idea, one complex idea being discussed in it, regardless of the number of words, I will still split the sentence. So I don't want to discuss more than one idea in one sentence. The idea is that people who read our articles or our book chapters are also people just like us. They might be tired. They might have short attention spans just generally, or have short attention at that point in time because it's the 10th article that they're reading. So we want to make our writing as accessible and easy as possible for them. And it has been proven through behavioral science, etc., that short sentences are the way to go in this regard. When there are less words to consume before you hit that full stop, it's easier for the brain to understand. So that is the first. So this is something you can choose follow in your abstracts as well. Second thing I would say is use simple language. Use simple words in the language. Again, this is something, at least when we were kids, we might have thought that it is cool to use words that people don't know. If someone has to use a dictionary to sit down and understand your writing, then sometimes we might think that's a sign of good vocabulary. It is my experience that that is not the case. Again, the purpose of communication and the purpose of writing is to make the thought to communicate the thought as efficiently as possible. So if someone has to sit down with a dictionary, if a reasonably well-educated person has to sit down with a dictionary and understand what you're writing, then that is not something to be proud of, but something to change. You should be able to write in simpler words. And here I'm not saying that you should use imprecise words or incorrect words. When there are alternatives between two precise words, use the simpler word. If you have to use change or transform in a sentence and both make sense, use change. Don't use transform because change is a simpler word. Definitely don't try to use complex words or complex sentence structures for the sake of sounding smart. I don't think it makes us sound smart. I think it makes our reading dense, and people just don't read our writings. So don't use double negatives. Don't use unnecessary long or complicated words. Yes, just keep the sentences as simple as possible. It is in this regard that academic writing has shifted from third person to first person, because we generally talk in first person, right? So it's easier to understand. It's simpler for a reader to understand when the writing is in first person. But like I said, this is subject to what that particular reader expects, especially for the second kind of research proposal kind of abstract. You know who you're writing it to. So if there is a particular kind of language that reader expects, then you write to that. The default should always be to make it as simple as possible. And in that regard, I would also advocate the use of first person. I think I had one last tip to give on writing. Let me just check that. I think I think that was it, perhaps. I think that something. Yeah, I think we can close this segment with that. Write simple sentences, write short sentences. I have some concluding thoughts, but and then we can open the floor to like a proper question and answer format. I have one question, but yes, but before that, please feel free to put questions in chat on this segment or generally also. For your ethical point of view on usage of AI to assist in research paper writing, my ethical point of view is that we should adopt new technology usage in our writing. So we should adopt AI tools to help improve our writing. This is subject to, again, what organizers expect for a particular event. So I have no idea on what GLC expects for this particular conference. But generally, my point of view is that we should use AI. In fact, that is a weakness that I have noticed in my own writing. I have not used any AI tools ever in my writing, and I'm not proud of that. I think I should learn to use these AI tools, and I'm trying to learn to use these AI tools. It's just that you don't give a singular prompt into an AI tool. That's not how you use an AI tool. It's a process to learn, and I myself don't know that process well enough. It's a process we are all learning right now. These AI tools came maybe a year ago. It's about writing multiple prompts, refining your writing by using that AI tool. So giving one sentence, putting that into the AI tool, saying, can you make this shorter? Can you make this more formal? Can you make this part less prominent? So you have to really play with that and find it. If you're just going to ask the AI, can you write an essay on this topic? I don't think ethically that's a good way to go about it. You're not improving your writing, you're presenting someone else's or some other entity's work as your own. It has dimensions of plagiarism as well. But there is a space for proper usage of AI. I am an advocate for it. I wouldn't say I'm a practitioner of it yet, but that is due to me not getting around to doing it, not because I don't want to do it. Thank you, Shreya. Somewhat a slightly technical point. I don't think I'm studying in an Ivy League university, but I take your point. I've been blessed and privileged to study in good universities throughout my life. How difficult was it? Okay, it's just that I have taken hour-long seminars on this very same topic on how to prepare for these applications and how to do that. So it's a little difficult to condense all of that into a 2-minute answer. It's not about how difficult it is. It's just there is a process to follow for doing it properly. So when you don't follow the process, it feels like you're lost. It feels unachievable. The process is not easy. The process is substantial. But I would rather use the word substantial than difficult. So there is stuff to do. There is a lot of work to do throughout your 3 years. It's not difficult work in that only a few people can do it, or you have to be born a genius to do it. I don't think that's true at all. I think everybody can do it. But if there are a lot of things to be done to check the boxes that these kind of universities are looking for, what are these steps? What is the work you put in? Like I said, that going into that is an hour-long seminar on its own. But very a summary of that is there is actually a podcast that I did on this that I share with Aishwarya, and Aishwarya can share that. I don't know how that technically that will work out, but she can, if possible, she can share it with a larger audience. But to give like a very short summary, you do things that you have an interest towards, and you build up a very strong competence on it. And at the end of 4 years or 3 years, when you apply to these universities, you have something that you're exceptional at, and you show that. So yeah, that I understand that is a very vague answer, but unfortunately, I can't go into more depth than that in this forum. Can you suggest some online platform where we can get some samples of abstract for applicants? I would not recommend that, Nivedita, and I have never searched for such samples. I don't know. Do you have any difficulty, like any step in this process there where you're struggling? If you can articulate that, maybe I can try to help you with it. But I don't think looking at a sample is a very good way to draft your abstract. I would rather follow the steps I discussed in the presentation today. And if you have any doubts with that, I'm very happy to clear that also. But I would not recommend going through sample abstract because you can never quality control for these. They may be written by sources that are just writing for the sake of writing. So I don't have much. Very good questions. Thank you for engaging. The abstract has a structure. So that I'm smiling because I've been trying to say the structure. Yeah, but no, maybe that's only because I did not present this as a structure. I only presented the things to include in the abstract. The structure. So I hope you understood what all you need to put in the abstract, because that's what I've been trying to say through the presentation. Now, your question of structure would then be how to order the things that you put in the abstract. That will depend topic to topic. I don't think you should necessarily structure them as the buckets I told you. So even if you take my second abstract, you would see that I talk about, so always you explain what your topic is first. So yeah, I think at that level we can determine the structure. We can say that you always explain what your topic is first. But then I start showing what my value of my research is. I just go back to explaining the topic. I show what US and EU are, why I'm choosing US and EU, which is again explaining the topic. Then I go back to showing the value. I show that I'm building upon existing literature. Uh, in this paragraph, it's showing value, how it helps. Finally, I showed what I've done so far, what I will try to do next. Um, it's not about, it's not that there's a specific rule that, so we can say in most cases, your explanation of the topic will come first. But beyond that, there are no specific rules. What is important is that there should be a flow between each parts. And what I mean by that is each send my second sentence should follow the first sentence in some logic. In that, when you read the first sentence, the reader should have a question in their mind, and the second sentence should answer that question. So that's one way of putting it. Or another way of putting it is the second sentence should be logically linked to the first sentence. In the same manner, the second paragraph should be logically linked to the first paragraph, the third paragraph to the second paragraph. So as long as there is no break between paragraphs, as long as you're not talking about two completely different things between in the same paragraph or between two adjacent paragraphs, it's all right. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I can help with structuring beyond that. But it was a very good question. I don't know if I've done as much justice to the question as it deserves. We have 10 minutes more. You don't need to do these questions in rapid fire. You can take a couple of minutes of breather and then just wait. You can think. There are more questions than there. I'm sorry, Nivedra. I'd gone offline to just check that podcast link that I talked about in the previous answer. I'll come to your question in a second. This is the link to the podcast where I speak about what you should do in your undergrad to improve your chances of making it to a good university for your master's and postgraduate education. So people can check that out if it's helpful. Nivedita's question. Yes, sorry, Nivedita. Can we add expert opinion / jurist opinion in a paper that is submitted at you're talking about the final paper? Definitely. So I would say that maybe I'm understanding this question wrong, and if I am, please feel free to correct me. Yes, the way I understand the question, definitely, because that is our research, right? We are talking about what other people have said already on our topic. We will say that, we will say how much we agree with them, we will say how much we disagree with them, and we will say why we disagree with them on something. Most importantly, we will say what else are we saying. So this is what 5 experts said on this topic. This is what I have to say on this topic, which is slightly different from what the existing experts have said. So that is sort of how I understand this legal research in an academic setting. So you definitely do include expert opinion in your final paper, and you do even include that in your abstract, your research proposal abstract, like I had shown you. So in my abstract, I do talk about what other scholars have said and how I plan to build on it. Is it good to divide up the paper into subtopics or sub-ideas or just different paragraphs? It's great to divide your topics into paper into subtopic or ideas. And here I'm talking about the final paper. Your abstract itself is 500 words. I would not, unless there is a need. So how we decide that is, like I said, your two adjacent paragraphs should never talk about two completely different things because that will break your structure. So if you ever feel that happening, even in a 500-word abstract, then it's good to divide those into subtopics with headings. In a larger paper, like the 2,500-word paper that you'll be submitting at the end, I think it would be very difficult to follow if you don't divide those into subtopics. So you have to divide that into subtopics would be my strong recommendation. I've seen very few papers which have not been divided into subtopics. Maybe we can take one more question if there is one, and then I just want to say a few concluding thoughts, and then I'll hand over to Aishwarya. I'll just wait a minute if there's a question.
So I just had one question, like I had a query. It was regarding whether abstracts require citations or footnote. You had discussed it earlier, but could you just...
Sure. Would you like me to repeat that, Aishwarya? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, there was a query from a participant. It was whether abstracts require citations or footnotes.
Yes, Aishwarya. So, thank you. First priority, look at what the organizer says. Some organizers of the conference or the publication that you're giving your abstract for might say, you do not require citations in the abstract. You do not encourage footnotes in the abstract. If they say that, you give priority to that. You always give priority to the body you're submitting your writing to. My default recommendation is that if you write the abstract well enough, you will need to use citations and footnotes because you will speak about prior literature in the area. I said that one of the burdens in the abstract is for you to show how you're adding value in your research. You cannot show how you're adding value in your research unless you at least briefly mention what other people have done before you. So you have to say, I have seen 5 scholarly works in this area, in this area. Those 5 have said these things, but I am saying something different. So to say that those 5 have said different things, you would have to cite them. So in that way, I think a footnote or a citation is inescapable in the research proposal kind of abstract. They are completely unnecessary in the final publication abstract because that is just you mentioning your findings. You don't need a footnote there. Does that make sense, Aishwarya? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Just then I will just close the session, at least on my part. Just wanted to say and I want to close an anecdote. I have a professor from my undergraduate studies I'm still quite fond of, and we talk a lot. He used to say that trying to study the law or legal research just via these kind of webinars or just by reading a book is like trying to learn swimming through postal correspondence. If anybody knows swimming, they would know that you can't swim by learning it through postal correspondence, right? You have to jump into a lake or jump into a pool or jump into the ocean to learn swimming. The books you read, the webinars you attend will help in giving you some theory about swimming. What is a front stroke? What is a breaststroke? How do you hold your head up? It has its place, but you won't learn swimming unless you jump. Similarly, you won't learn abstract writing unless you write the abstract. And here I think I don't think I need to stress on that point very much because hopefully all of you are going to write the abstract for the upcoming presentation and you're all interested in doing this. But yes, unless you do the act, like I don't think it's possible to learn abstract writing. What I said are just some tips that will help you start on the process. So with that, I close and I once again thank the organizers and the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed a very wonderful session. And in fact, you even used your own research papers to show us how a proper abstract should be made. Now, I invite Malavika, the convener of Bhagat Singh Study Circle, to formally propose the vote. Thanks.
Okay, with that, we have come to the end of our session. First of all, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Mr. Sarath Ninan Mathew, sir. The session was equally interesting and enriching. You have explained this vast area of research into the basic terms so that it could be easily understood. And despite of your busy schedules, you have made time for this program. Thank you very much, sir. It's for the first time that we are organizing a national conference under our college union. So I extend my sincere thanks to college union representatives, conveners of Law Journal Club, and the BSSC coordinators for their support. And last but not the least, I thank all of you who have joined the session. Once again, thank you all, and we are winding up our session.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you all
Thank you,
for
sir.